Thank you for watching the Housing Oregon YouTube channel. Be sure to join our network and get involved in the work that we are doing. If you can, please like and subscribe. It helps us build this channel, which serves as a platform to communicate with our members. This video is part of our 2025 annual conference. We're looking for folks to be on the conference planning committee. Please email info@housingoregon.org.
Was the designer to redevelop this parcel. It has a dirt road as a street out front and a slight hill in the area. When we started construction, one of the lots across the street from us had not dedicated their right of way, so we didn't really even have very much room to work. So we'll get into more of these details on this.
And I think just as far as the design, this was one where we didn't develop to the max envelope of the building, which was really exciting. Like we could have probably built more units, gone much denser, but that left us space to create all these really cool community spaces. We have 2 courtyards. It's got there are walk-ups, as you said, and we've got single-sided corridors with cross-ventilation in addition to HVAC. So we really focused on like family-scale things and tried to make it spaces where communities can thrive.
Thank you. Part of the thing also is to kind of keep in mind for both of the projects, if we look at the Colonia del Valle Prospero, just the context of you have all the really fairly well-developed area, and the site is really in this area where, really is asking for quite a bit of the infrastructural development and right-of-way development. And not to the same extent, but also with the Jade Apartments, the context is in the area where there's a lot of infrastructural development that's still needed. And our partners, Metro, who's involved in this also are very much aware of that part as well, right? And that's really kind of the underlying part of some of these smaller projects. So things that we're going to kind of look through are the infrastructure development burdens, jurisdictional complexity, and code misalignments. Starting with the infrastructure development burdens, I would like to invite the CDVP team, Colonia del Valle Prospero team, to kind of highlight some of those issues, and then we'll pass it on to Jade Apartments team as well.
I'm going to start by saying I absolutely hate wetlands. There is nothing worse in the whole world than a 0.02 acre wetland that needs to be mitigated. 4 months delay, lots and lots of funds and time thrown at it, but we finally got through. That was our major hurdle. Another one is we are being asked or being told by the city that we need to build an arterial road right through our property in order to make this work. So if you can see there we go. John has created this wonderful little map. You can see our phase 1 is that white block. The arterial road is going to go straight through the subdivision to the north and connect down to Spicer Road on the south, which is a county road. So not only do I have to deal with the county or the city, but now we're going to run into county issues as well, tying into the jurisdiction there. So this is a major burden for our property and part of the problem with building in a rural community. We're estimating that this road's approximately $2.5 million. So, John, you have anything to add to that one?
What's the budget on the project?
$13 million for the phase 1 project, and $2.5 million to develop the entire road.
So yeah, significant burden for developing these sites. It really underscores a kind of familiar theme for affordable housing in general, is that with the funding constraints that these projects are up against, that you really do need to consider rural sites like this. There may not be an abundance of properties that are going to meet every expectation, that has no pieces that you need to figure out or mitigate here. And for us on this property was on the urban growth boundary of the city itself. So to them, it was a priority to make this connection across the site. And knowing that that was going to play into it here, there was a lack of the existing infrastructure, and for the developer to take that on is a pretty big upfront expectation. We even broke the site into 2 parcels here to kind of phase the development along with the funding that was going to be received in chunks. So the right-of-way construction is going to span both sites, but the first part of the site will only connect the first phase up there.
So really the strategy in this case was for us to kind of have to partition the site, and that really then meant that jurisdictionally, like with that particular piece of partition really took quite a bit of time, and then everything else had to trail from that, right? And could you speak a little bit to that, Carmen?
The wetlands, actually.
No.
The wetlands was our driving factor. We couldn't record the partition until the wetlands were mitigated and we had DEQ and DSL approval. And what happened there was, this is my biggest complaint about this, there's no stacking of public hearing periods. They can't run consecutively. They all have to have their individual. So we had 4 public hearing periods varying from 15 days to 45 days. That was what caused the delay. If there is a way for us to talk to the state at this level and say, hey, this is why we can't build housing quickly. It was a 0.02 acre wetland, guys. It was literally just a little pile of weeds and 4-month delay. We should have broken ground in March on this project, and we are just now mobilizing our construction crew.
And I think it speaks as well to just the complexity of when the processes take place, that for a project like this and for this jurisdiction, there was an expectation that partitioning the site and having a plan for this would happen before all of the development would happen. And frequently those things can run concurrently. So having an idea in mind about what that roadmap is going to look like for your jurisdictional requirements from the start is something that we really took away from this process. Pass it on.
Thank you, John. And if you could then highlight some for the Jade Apartments, that particular site.
So this parcel, there were 3 parcels actually that we consolidated together. And there's a 50-foot right-of-way right in front of it. And this was all land that the city had annexed maybe 40, 50 years ago. But it was still kind of rural, as you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, still kind of in a rural setting. And also on frontage was a retention pond and a pump house from Portland BES. So we had a lot of public infrastructure, completely outdated types of urban development, and then vacant properties. And what I mistook for a simple half right-of-way project was not as easy as we thought it would be. It turns out with the right-of-way not being dedicated on the farm property there, we had very little space to work with, so we had to give up property, jog the right-of-way for 89th Avenue, and then provide all the dry wells in it, because existing dry wells in the intersection were already kind of bubbling over. That led into the BES retention pond. So we kind of thought, oh, well, we can pave this road right here. That'll be great, and we'll do it as a public works permit. But it involved a lot of jurisdictions that had a lot of very specific requirements, and similar to you working through like the location where the water meters gets set in the sidewalk. Those kind of things delayed us for, again, months trying to negotiate this half right-of-way. In the end, really, everybody pulled together and made it happen, but there was a lot of things left undone and just allowed to go forward just so we could get our permit-ready letter and get started with construction. So yeah, this is just one of the infrastructure issues that we dealt with on this project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the biggest challenges, or one of the biggest challenges, was just we would go in and have a meeting with the city and, you know, think we have a path forward, and then there would be another thing discovered, and then it would lead to another meeting, and it would just keep going on and on. And you know, I think that like having that roadmap, like John was saying, of like what's the overall process and what all we need to get on these like edge of city kind of sites where everyone has a dream of what it could become. There's lots of plans of what it could become. And, you know, there's a lot of stakeholders, and I think everyone at the city just wants the best environment possible. In those situations, I think knowing all those stakeholders and what they want is really important. And I think, I don't know if you can jump to the next slide maybe for the potential solutions, but I think like there's other ways to do this, to get the stakeholders from the city to already design and build the grid before projects go in, or maybe there's another way there's some incentives for development of those sites without infrastructure from the city, because that's ultimately, infrastructure that everyone uses, not just the one project. So like, the road project is a great example of, you want to build a whole arterial, and it's on the back of this small 50-unit apartment building.
By the way, it's benefiting Walmart.
Yeah, benefiting Walmart up the street, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending where you are. But I think there's just a lot of these little things that come up that end up burdening small projects that we think there's probably like a good number of things we could do when we all sit down together to talk about what the next steps could be.
Any questions for the two development team on the challenges and on the recommendations? Yes, please.
Besides DEQ for wetlands, did either of the properties have the home funding in it?
Yep.
For environmental review?
Yes.
Was that also part of your timeline?
Yes, we had home funding, so we couldn't do anything that would alter the site because of that. So that was what delayed my partitioning. I couldn't do the partition because of the home funding. So yeah, it was just a big cluster of everything that could go wrong did go wrong with the wetland.
And it was an interesting, I guess, impetus as well, because when we started it, we actually didn't want to impact the wetland, but we learned that because the street needed to be improved on that side, that we would have to go through it. And so when we realized that we had to do that, we had to start the process of figuring out who was going to be impacted for it. We needed to ask both the state and the Fed if the waters belonged to them, and if it had belonged to the United States, it would have been even more review. But they decided that it was just the state of Oregon's problem. So we had to go through this period that was literally a choice limiting action period where you couldn't touch the site at all until it was reviewed. Yeah, even a water meter to the existing house, we needed to finish the DEQ review before we could go into that. So that was something that I think early on, if we had known we had to do that, we could have probably made plans to start that as soon as we possibly could have.
On a note, we are tackling the wetland on phase 2 as soon as possible.
Lessons learned from this one. Could you
Yes.
speak a little bit about this choice limiting action? What is this? Because that caused quite a bit of a waiting period.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it was during this time period, there was basically a review that had to go to through the Department of Environmental Quality, and the joint permit application for that had to go out to a public period as well to inform the neighbors and all the jurisdictions that it was going to be impacted. So gave them time to speak now or forever hold their peace about what was going to be done there. And that time period, I believe, was 120 days. And then the public period to open that up to questions was a further 30 days. And so that whole time period there, we weren't allowed to do anything on the site.
And the DQ period was an additional 35 days
Yes.
after that.
So a lot of time to allow for everyone to speak up if they had opinions on it. But yes, this one was very ironic to us. If you see pictures of this, it is just the smallest ditch on the side of the site, but it required a lot of review. And so we just wanted to make sure we covered every base with it. Yes.
Did anyone speak up during that?
Nope.
We had no public comments during that time.
None.
But the time still, they will still run, the
Yes.
clock will still be run, right? And so, while serving on the Housing Production Advisory Council, we are looking at policies at a higher level and see, how can it mitigate it. But when we actually, in practice, there are all these little things that really kind of come in. That really is harder to define when you're looking at it in terms of policy level to see what we can do to kind of make things faster. And so going through these smaller scale projects and actually experiencing these, we wanted to just kind of share these with you. And I'm sure there's plenty in this room have similar sort of the constraints that you've gone through and new ways of innovating thinking you've got to do to kind of just speed up your development process, right? Kevin, you have?
Yeah, I don't want us to just be complaining because we all are going through this all the time. But to me, it seems like around the country, people have figured out how to do this, right? There needs to be a way that the whole picture can be looked at. So, because every department that we dealt with multiple jurisdictions, multiple agencies, there were lots of inconsistencies between their requirements and so forth and their processes, and they sometimes were intersecting or just kind of getting tangled up. But one thing we did notice a kind of a lack of was a willingness to sit down in a big room with leadership in those departments that could say, look, we have got to smooth off some of these edges where we have very minor technical issues, but they've caused a complete snarl, and now we're stuck. And they were very simple things, and we finally did get them, but it took forever. And each little tiny issue, I was saying, like, where do you put to move a light pole 12 inches? Nope, you have to start your whole process over. You know, this kind of thing, this sort of rigid process. We've all felt if we could all be in one room and like, let's look at these things and look at the whole context here. Things that seem to mean a lot, maybe they're not a big deal, and we could make a kind of a group decision about this, but we were not able to accomplish that. But that was what we felt like, hey, there are some organizational kind of or process decisions that we could really help by doing this. But so far we haven't been successful in being able to like get leadership and line staff in the same room so we can talk about the valve. And at one point I had to remind the city of Portland that the other part of the city was investing $6 million in this project, and like it was time sensitive. And but people are like, I don't care, that's not my department. So this is something I think that these are not technical issues we're dealing with, they're process issues.
Which I think is a good segue to the next part, which is just looking at these jurisdictional complexity. And I know all of us are intent on making sure that the housing production happens, but yet, you know, there's still disconnects that we see, and thinking about how can we work together to mitigate some of that so the production can be a little bit more smooth. In that aspect, I'm going to invite the Jade team to kind of speak a little bit to the jurisdictional complexity that you all went through.
Well, first of all the people who worked at the City of Portland were fantastic, and they were doing a great job according to what their mandate was. The problem is they were completely siloed and not talking to each other. We made some progress at people getting together and saying, okay, I get it, you know, we'll give a little, you give a little, you give a little. And we were able to get it, and it's in construction. But it was arduous and grueling, and none of the changes really made that much of a difference, truly, from a technical standpoint. So, I mean, like I said, we don't like to resort to political pressure or calling somebody's boss or whatever. We hope that we can, with everybody here, you know, make this just raise the awareness of it so this can trickle up to elected officials, to leadership in Salem, to the department heads and the many departments that we all work with, to somehow when they hear this, like a light bulb goes off and says, we need one of those get-togethers where we can sort out all these little issues. Because I'm sure it's really frustrating for the people that are trying to get these things approved or stop bad ideas from being approved, that they're working in a vacuum. And but anyway, we think there is a really pretty simple solution once the awareness gets up at the levels where people take action for it. Who's like the head of a department or a technical reviewer or something like that? Because I want to make sure that we respect you. We want to work together, okay? So tell your bosses to get involved.
Yeah, I think we pulled up just a couple slides from, you know, the different processes you go through in permitting, and it's like everyone has a timeline and everyone has their steps, and they're simple on the face of it. But the key this doesn't show is like each of these little items is dependent on another item in another one of these departments. And so those are friction points that we found. And I think everyone's nodding their head yes, and like, yes, this happens. But I think just highlighting it as much as we can and asking everyone to, like, how do we fix it? What can we streamline? Where can we get people that aren't dependent on each other?
To have a conversation.
Yeah, to have a conversation with each other. So they're like, you know, the city is just making one decision based on all the things instead of making a bunch of small decisions. This is just a quick example, and I don't know if you can see it up there, but basically the top is you know, PBOT wanting no encroachment into their ped zone, no matter what, 100%. And then a year later, after we made some changes to the way the sidewalk works and encroaches curving around onto our site, the transportation director during the permit review is saying, well, there are typically PBOT exceptions that allow you to do the sidewalk straight, so can you just make it straight? And it's like, these are the kind of things that we run into, and we're really trying to, you know, not to call out PBOT, because PBOT wanted to have their standards met, which is great, and same with the transportation department. They just wanted the best road. Everyone wanted the same thing, but, you know, how do we get it so everyone is aligned on the goals? That's really what we want.
And similarly, a few examples with the Colonia project.
And for Colonia, we had a very similar, where there were a few departments who were all working together. And I think that the key takeaway we had from this is we really just wanted to be able to know what each other's goals were and how we could best work together to meet those. For us, the best example of this was that the planning and the public works and building department were all looking out for each other's backs and making sure that there were requirements that allowed for them to approve the other people's department's review. So, for example, our building permit would not be released until we bonded the work at the roadway. And that was really just a cover your back for the public works department to ensure this goal that they had of building that road. And so getting together with them and understanding what their goals were and how we could set a roadmap for getting to check off all of these boxes, I think is really key to getting to the finish line, or starting line in this case, for starting construction.
Anything to add on that one? Okay. And then another one aspect.
Oh, this, yeah.
So timelines, as I said, we had a huge delay in our timeline. But the problem here is with the home funding, I couldn't do any choice limiting actions to the site, so it delayed my partition, so it delayed everything, and not having the permit fees until everything was approved was what really hurt us. I couldn't get ahead of the game there. I couldn't finalize my budgets internally to submit those to OHCS until the final moment. So finding a way to streamline that with the city to be able to get at least projected costs ahead of time seems like my biggest challenge at this point. John, you want to?
And I think that some of the interesting takeaways from this as well is that there are a lot of incentives that they are offering for this. You know, like, we simply didn't know what the overall fees would be, but there were positive credits in here as well for completing the roadway. The city wants to incentivize that. Unfortunately, though, for funding for these state agencies and for the lenders and things like that, they want to see permit in hand, or site improvement permit in hand. And so those things that the city needs don't always align with when your lenders or your groups need to approve things. So I think that a little bit more flexibility there, or just being able to give a heads up to say, hey, at the end of the day, when you get all of your permits approved, it's going to cost this much, so that lenders and organizations can have an idea of how much the closing costs are going to be before all of the permits are in place, goes a long way for getting everybody to the same place at the same time.
Thank you, John. And going to the some potential solutions on this, maybe I'm going to ask Carmen, because this is actually your idea. This was one.
You know, I would love to have each city have a permit coordinator, somebody that is your one-stop person that can help you walk through this, similar to a technical advisor at OHCS. I think the technical advisors with OHCS have been doing an amazing job. And if we could have the cities implement something similar, I think it would make the process very, very much easier for everybody in the development world. Again, the stronger version of project coordinator, somebody who understands the city's processes. Each city's different, so we may be doing one thing in Woodburn and another thing in Albany and a third thing in Salem. It helps if I have one contact at the city who can say, no, you're doing that this way here instead of that way, if that makes sense.
And we want to give serious props here to all these jurisdictions, especially small jurisdictions where, you know, these departments are not huge groups. They may be 6 to 10 people total. And so imagining that there is one person in each department that is the head of that department and they have their own goals, and then there is also somebody who can help coordinate them together can be a big ask. But I think that just getting everyone together and having an understanding of what those decision points and those goals for each department really goes a long way.
Yeah, the project coordinators in Portland specifically always do a great job, but they seem to, they could probably be stronger, have a little bit of decision power, have some ability to bring people together. Maybe like if they say a person needs to be at a meeting, then that person needs to show up from the other department or something, or I don't know, like just more ability to bring people into the group would be great. So we have that power, because Portland does do a good job of having that one coordinator on larger projects. Which I think on the 40 unit we begged to have that coordinator because I don't think we would have normally. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with the one-stop permit. And, you know, around the country, there's models for this, right? It's an accepted thing. And there are probably cities that we don't admire very much that have extremely efficient programs that we can learn from. You know, Houston, Phoenix, they know how to get a permit out. And we should, no, I'm not suggesting that we try to grow like that, but the administrative structure is extremely efficient. And within the Portland urban growth boundaries, we have very few sites that are flat, have 4 sides with sidewalks and utilities there that don't need any changes. There's none. And so every one of our sites is going to be complicated and not compliant with the standards that are on the books. And we love our city. Our planners love it, and it's beautiful and livable because of how much we care about it. But all that care is turning into reams and reams of super granular regulations that are set up so that if you don't meet every single one, you're stuck. And no really easy way to kind of negotiate minor changes so that everything fits together. I'm not sure I understand how that comes together, but we do know that this needs to escalate up to leadership, especially of the departments and the cities, and the elected officials and the key administrative leadership in these jurisdictions. Without that, folks on the line that are trying to do their job don't really have the authority to make these changes or even to cross over the lines to talk to people. So who's a housing developer in here? Oh, good. Who's in the public sector? Okay, good. So, and you guys all know each other and like each other, right? So, yeah, I think that it helps when there's a group that can come together and advocate for this kind of thinking, because we will need to do it. We're getting it at a point where we're not going to be able to build anything unless we're able to work more closely together across jurisdictions and don't change the regs. Let's figure out ways to smooth it out when we get there so that it works.
Questions for the panel on this aspect? Kurt?
I have a question about Colonia and the City of Albany. Did the city underwrite this project with any locally controlled funds like construction excise tax revenue?
No, we did receive a $225,000 CDBG grant from the city. Sorry. We did receive a $225,000 CDBG grant from the city, and I believe our SDC fees for transportation were reduced by 25% for this project.
Because I think the legislative intent behind CDT was that those jurisdictions that were enacting CDT would be using that to underwrite affordable housing projects, which is locally controlled, could be used for infrastructure offsets. So just connecting those dots so that it's not just federal funds that bring with it the NEPA, environmental review, and choice limiting action.
I don't think the city had any funds available at the time that we got funded for this project. This was funded 9% in the last NOFA round. So I don't think they had funding at the time through that program. For phase 2, we will be looking at that.
Yeah, thank you all so much for diving into this. I'm here from the resident services side, and I find it so fascinating how you're talking about the process issues, not technical issues. Because in terms of getting a homeless family moved into a voucher unit takes months because of all of these different
Process you.
these hierarchies that are present. So my question is, I don't know if you guys are interfacing with AI at all, but currently, like I would have been able to build a process tracking platform where you can plug in the documentation, and then it's able to scan emails and tell you exactly what the next action item is. Is this something where you could have some sort of centralized platform that government agencies and developers could access with an AI interface that could help see where these friction points are happening?
That's an interesting.
I think, personally, I think so, because along with when we were thinking through this, when Carmen was suggesting one-stop shop, one of the things we thought was like, could it also be a I said one page, compliance sheet, right? Where you know exactly all the things you need to kind of take care of, right? And kind of like what you are suggesting, I think, with the AI platform, where all these things are kind of collated in one place, and you can make sure that you're streamlining the process. Am I understanding that correctly, right?
And even if you don't streamline it, you have distributed cognition that could
Yeah.
help people understand it quicker. And you also could see the chains of causality and the ripple effect of an action. So, I don't know how you guys all manage this, if it's just email chains and what's in your brain.
Right now, yeah.
I would say, yeah, it is a very interesting, it's very old school, a lot of these processes. I know for Albany, it was very much people meeting in a room and then receiving notices by mail, literally, where this is, the action, the notice of their decision. And so having a place, I really think that there could be an online checklist of some kind that made it very simple to see, here's what this party is asking for, here's the action that they acted upon, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that there is something to be said for that in-person meeting, where it really is a lot harder, or I guess easier, to understand what people's intentions are when you have them talking to your face, like hearing from the Public Works Department, we have a priority to make this road be improved on this side because we see the density going up, or something like that. Having the person who is the expert in that field tell us exactly what it is, I think was immensely valuable. And trying to filter it into a report can sometimes lose some of that nuance. So I would say that I advocate for in-person on that and wish we could do more of it, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting that you bring up having like a central database. I think another thing Portland maybe does well is have like an alternate means and methods that's public, that you can, as a searchable database. And so if you could bring a lot of these issues and processes and make them more public and see what all the issues are, and like, oh, how did this project get rid of the wetlands, and work through that process? Oh, this is what I need to plan for. Like, if you could highlight that in some way, and it's a lot of data, but like you said, there's now new ways of crunching data and making it, raising what you want to the top of it. So yeah, I think that's a good point.
Any other questions, thoughts for the panel? Yeah.
Wetland mitigation. Couldn't you have purchased wetland credits in a different location, which is a bank of
We
wetland
did.
credits, and not mitigate?
We did.
So you did that?
Yes.
As well as, that was your form of
That was our form of mitigation for this. Yes, it cost me, I think it was approximately $6,000 to mitigate 0.02 acres. And again, we're only doing it because the sidewalk has to go to the very edge of the property line, so.
I'll say for wetlands too, the folks who have a good understanding of what the contributing resources are and how those play into those are worth their weight in gold.
Yes.
And we were very lucky on this process to have Pacific Habitat, the person who literally wrote the book on Albany's wetlands and tributary system. So he had an exceptional understanding of whether the resources in this area were something that we needed to mitigate in another way, or if it were a problem for us to simply, use these wetlands areas and not have to, bank the credit, exactly. So.
Any other questions? Okay. The last piece we want to, go ahead.
Code misalignments go
Okay.
down
The
further.
last piece we wanted to kind of touch on is just just concerns with code misalignment, and what do we mean by this? I know with the aspiration for housing production, I know the state is passing certain Senate bills and House bills, and as it trickles down, I know a lot of the local jurisdiction have to then scramble to kind of make all these things kind of then fit into their local zoning, right? And sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, and just trying to track some of these things, and some of these codes are kind of in contradiction to each other. And so how do we, work with through that? And so I wanted to kind of just invite maybe Kevin, you can start, and then.
Yeah, I said before, everything that's been written, at least here in Portland, was for a reason, and it has created a pretty amazing place. But at a certain point, it's not possible to even find everything that's in the code. There's links that go nowhere, that you're referenced back to documents from the 70s. You have to pay quite a large sum of money to sit with a team that will then interpret the code for you. And it takes quite a while just to get this jurisdiction. In my previous life, I was a planning consultant, did a lot of zoning ordinances in California, EIRs and so forth. And so I still have to hire attorneys and planning consultants to try to really get to the bottom of what the rules are. So for me, it's like this should be user-friendly and it should be transparent. And I know it's a ton of money and a ton of work to consolidate 30, 40 years of really high-level development regulation and get it into a simple handbook that we can all understand. But I sort of feel like we have to do that, right? It's because it's not fair to the applicants or to folks that don't have the staff or the training to have to go to this expense just to read the law. And we also don't think it's fair to have to wait so long to get an interpretation and so forth. I mean, these are big stumbling blocks early in the game when you're trying to make some decisions. So this, and the other thing we notice is that, the codes and the requirements, they don't align across the interdepartmental changes, and we sometimes find ourselves in the middle of squabbles between two agencies. Streets wants this, Parks wants this, Housing wants this, and the city manager wants this other thing, and they don't agree on it, and we're like, we're not really, is it our job to mediate this? So I think this is something that we all struggled with on this. We called it code misalignments, but it's, I think it would be a big job, but wouldn't be hard. It would just be a lot to read all this stuff, bring it all up to speed, cut out probably 3/4 of it that's conflicting or outdated, and have a nice new simple code. And I know people are probably rolling their eyes like it's not that easy, this is hard to do this, and it is. But I mean, we're here to try to, share our cause here that in order to build more housing, better housing, faster and less expensive, then we need some help. And so we're hoping you can all sort of like either adopt an advocacy position or don't, but don't just do nothing. I think this is what kind of what we're trying to say about these these things. We know they come from good places, but they just need to be tended to and fixed up. So
Maybe I'll pass it to Colonia team, and you can talk about this particular.
Yeah, I think speaking to that, it's really important to kind of have an idea of what the climate in your jurisdiction is on what they are trying to incentivize, and just really knowing where they are with adopting mandates from the state and how they are processing it. We were very lucky. We had somebody who on the project, the planning director, reached out to us to give us a heads up to say, hey, you should maybe listen in on this city council meeting coming up because the code amendment may have implications for your project. And so I would say that if anything, get more involved in the community that you are trying to develop in and see what their priorities are. Because in this jurisdiction in Albany, they are fantastic for pushing forward middle housing opportunities and trying to push for affordable housing. But we're kind of in the middle of it because it was actively happening as our project was going in for permitting. So knowing what their goals are and when those things may take place can have big impacts for the project. So definitely an advocate for go get involved in these communities, and it can really help to know what could be coming down the pipeline for you as you try to develop in those areas.
And on this one, some potential solutions. Arthur, do you want to speak to some of this?
Yeah, sure. I think this ties in really well with the AI comment and standardizing and making codes searchable. So, we talk about different jurisdictions. Every jurisdiction has their own zoning code that's completely different. I mean, some use standardized codes, but mostly they will adjust and change, and every little city has their own. And it's a lot of work and a lot of money for staff to rebuild these to be custom, and then there's just a lot of risk to potential lawsuits and things. So, the building code has taken a different approach where it's just standardized for the whole state, and then there's little changes that can be made. So, we're seeing why couldn't you do that for the zoning code was one potential way to look at it. And then things become more equitable across communities, and we have more money could be spent to oversee that at a state level. So there's lots of positives from it, but it is a departure from how everything is done. So, but that was one recommendation we came up with. And then I think the other thing, John, this was actually your idea, which I really loved. Maybe you can talk to the post-application conference.
Yeah, many jurisdictions will do what they call a pre-application conference, or it's often just coming at the beginning of your project where they will talk about what, for the site and for the project that you're taking on, some keynotes, and these may come with the requirements, about fire access or things like that. But it's often the first and last time that everybody gets in the room together to talk about these things. And so as the project moves forward and you do get a document set in front of reviewers, it may be helpful for them to get back together for, say, a post-application conference where everyone has had a chance to look at how we interpreted, we hear what they say, and then we come back and put together documents that respond to that. So checking back in to see whether we met those expectations or not, and what the steps would be afterwards to meet those expectations if we haven't.
Any questions for the panel on the recommendations or any other thoughts?
Forgive me if this isn't really a well-formed question. I started writing code over 40 years ago, and zoning, of course, represents value. And take, for example, solar access easements that are embedded in a zoning code. That's a value. And if you had a state norm, you would somehow have to protect against unlawful takings or takings without compensation. So the bonus density incentive structure that is well known in Portland represents a value. Owners may or may not utilize that value. They can sell that value through an FAR transfer. So if the state were to establish a code, it would have to be the highest possible level of entitlement to prevent a takings case. I'm not a lawyer, but that would be my rationale. So you would want like double density in Albany, or maybe maybe triple density in Albany to cover all the eventual potential takings. Do you think a city could tolerate a state code that actually double the density in their jurisdiction?
Well, that's kind of what a lot of housing advocates really want, is that to happen.
Yeah.
So
That's probably the logical outcome of
yeah,
I mean, I think it's an open question. If anybody else, I mean, we have planners and developers in the room, right? Yeah.
working for them. So, but I can say that even with the FAR bonuses, very few developers are actually utilizing the bonus. But it's a value, and it's a value that can be banked, and it can be booked, and it can be sold or traded. So it needs to be accommodated in a state code.
This isn't like the only answer, right? Just guidelines for zoning, which are enabled at the federal level, right? We have standards across the country. Certain things always hold true, right? You can get a variance, or you have to get a use permit, and so forth and so on. The key thing is transparency and access to this information and equitable conclusions about how it's enforced. I'm a little leery of a state code personally, because that represents local control, local characteristics. For all cities are really different, and they economically strive to be different from each other so they can create a unique experience, unique lifestyle, and so forth. And as Kurt said, value systems. Those sometimes do go haywire, but it allows cities to control their own development. And states all across the West step in when people get too exclusionary or doing things that are not allowed, and they say, oh, state now controls this one issue. And that has been pretty effective. But there's no requirements to update these. There's no clearinghouse in this state where you have to renew your general plans and everything on a certain, except for the housing requirements. But codes don't need to be renewed. They don't need to be cleaned up. And it seems like the state could do a better job by regulating how cities, the stewardship of their codes, rather than by dictating what the code actually is, and require it to be kept at a certain level where it's fair and it's equitable, and it actually results in the kind of development that the cities want, rather than just in stopping everything from happening. Do we have more questions?
Right there.
For either project, was there anything that you learned design-wise that you can take forward to other projects, or that you think could help move things along with design?
design your street early. But are you thinking like formally the design of the building, or like when to design it and how it responds to the code, or what? Can you elaborate a little bit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll be using the same design basis for phase 2. So our phase 1 will carry over to our phase 2 with the same design basis. It's already our blueprint, and we're ready to move forward.
So to speak to that a little bit, as a designer for the project, one of the things we really wanted to make sure was cost containment. So for the cost containment, we were very disciplined in terms of just pure stacking, stack, and trying to mitigate any unnecessary spaces. So one of the reasons we were so constrained with all the spot and everything is Colonia del Valle Prospero 54 unit. So we did it as a garden style apartment concept using a lot of the CEDC, cost-effective design construction model. But that also meant that we were trying to do it in a repeatable model, so not trying to create any kind of a turn or anything, so very linear, which meant that we were very much constrained on either side, right? So on one side, we had the right-of-way width that we had to deal with, and then the setbacks and such, and the other end, we have the wetland. And so in between, we had just the perfect spot to fit in this 54-unit development. And anything that would change would would have a direct impact on the unit count, right? And that was one of the reasons now we're saying, like, get your street first, figure out all the other site constraints, and what are the predictability issues there, that we can figure out so we know exactly where our building spots lands. But the issue is when we have all these delays and the offset on the wetland jurisdiction and all those things are not as known, then we have a little bit of that issue, right? But we were working very closely to make sure that that is mitigated, and that's exactly what we're going to take forward for phase 2 as part of that design. And on the Jade, I don't know, Arthur, you want to speak to some of that?
Yeah, I think the one big thing we learned is going to the very extreme limits is probably a bad choice on these sites where there are all these fuzzy edges and you're not sure where things end. So like we didn't maximize our envelope. We didn't go to the street edge. We had some extra space left, and that helped us shift the building over a little bit when we needed to get an extra dry well in, or like when we had an extra 2-foot dedication on the street because the street wasn't working out quite right. Well, we actually have a little bit of extra gap in the courtyard, so we can move that over. So I would say when you have a site like this, don't think it's like a 200 by 200 standard Portland block where you can just take the whole property. You're going to have a lot of little extra things on the property that you weren't expecting, from the city requiring things, and then from like where your water meter goes and where your electrical service goes. Those aren't as standardized, and the city and the providers of like electricity also have their standards that are different in these outside sites, so also pay attention to that would be another good design piece. Yeah.
I mean, and also with the Colonia del Valle Prospero, now that we have gone through with the design committee and everything, we know that this is going to be approved and with all the exceptions and everything, and we're taking that same model and we're trying to be efficient that way, right? Like, yes, as designers, we may want unique things for everything, but we're really trying to be a team player here and trying to contain our design aspects as well to make sure that everything is much more, like it's easier to build, so to speak.
So total newbie here, but just asking in terms of process flow, oftentimes you have to have at least some level of design when you're approaching your funding, but then how does the code conversation and decision-making then inform that or reinform that, and then how are you not paying architect fees? I'm sorry, but up the hang as you do all these
Yeah.
revisions.
It really helps to find an architect that has already done this and knows these things are going to come up, and so they can kind of bake that in, so they can go like, oh, well, I know this is going to be an issue in the future, so I'm not going to go there, even though I haven't been told this yet. That kind of foreseeing the future is helpful. Obviously, you can't do that with everything, but that's I think one way to approach it.
Mm-hmm. That said, though, also I would say, like, limiting that to like just having to find the architect whose experience is also kind of not that helpful, because there are plenty of other professionals who are also trying to break into this field, right? And so how can this be equitably accessible for all designers, so you don't have to be the experienced designer, who's done this, been there? Because that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to produce these housing much more in a easy way, faster way. So everybody should be able to do that and not have to have that, been there, done that kind of a thing, right? So that's one of the things I think we really need to kind of focus on as well.
That's a good point, Corey.
And I think design-wise as well, one of the interesting things about affordable housing for this is that a lot of the metrics at the beginning are done at the unit scale. So having an idea of what the users of the space are going to be using, for example, on this, we focused on 2 and 3 bedroom apartment styles because we wanted to incentivize that families may be able to ready move into these spaces, and those had immediate implications for how the funding was devised based on that unit type. So that is a good starting point for some of these discussions.
I'm glad you brought that up, because really, when you're all building your capital stack, some funds fund by unit, others have funding limits. Sometimes there's just how much money is in the pot, how much can we ask for. Some of it's a percentage. So all of the communicating between the architects and the developers and your contractor on cost while you're in this early process. We're still talking about what do you do when you're in the early process here, is super important, and I think you're going to address this in your conclusion, so I won't jump over that. But we found that really helpful, working between our GC, Sarah, our own architects, our own contractors. But it really came down to the first funding source we went after to kick off limited the project to 40 units or less. And so we came and we said, well, we can only do 40 units on this site, and we know we're going to, normally we do put every single unit that we can put on a site. Every cubic centimeter of entitlement is built if we can. But in this case, we just had extra space because the funding source limited the unit count to 40. It was a small projects program. So I learned from this that, hey, sometimes it's not so bad to cram everything in there that you can, that we did have some flexibility to deal with some of the unknowns. But I would say that's a failure in our system. It's the unknowns. If we could make those fewer, then we would have a lot more efficient execution of the project.
Arthur, do you want to conclude us with the steps?
Yeah, I think a lot of this has been talk about what we can do, what cities can do, what jurisdictions can do, what can we change in the system. But I think like a more general steps for developers and designers living in the current world, how it is, we came up with just like a list of things that really we would recommend. And number one is definitely be proactive. Like you just have to go out, talk to everyone, talk to the city, talk to the managers of the departments, talk to, on the funding side, everyone, and just make sure you know what everyone's goals are, you know what everyone wants for this site. If there's a community meeting, use it in earnest to learn from the community what they want, and like you ask them and see if they know some plans. They're like, oh, maybe this site had a study done, and you don't know about that until you go to the community meeting, and then you can incorporate that and be a champion for them. And like just being proactive is really, really important, I think. And that's like, our second point is find people at the city that can help you navigate the politics, which is a big part of being proactive, I think. And I think, I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I said it before, we shouldn't have to resort to political pressure to get things done at the technical level. Nobody likes that. And sometimes we're just forced to. But yeah, being proactive at all the jurisdictions, staying in touch with everyone that you're working with in these areas, because sometimes they don't really 100% know what they're going to be required to do or how much leeway they have to do it. So I agree that keeping the communication alive as much as possible is really good, and try to knit together the people that you're all working with. They maybe don't want to be knitted together, but it definitely is necessary.
And yeah, finding those folks who are going to be advocates is just absolutely essential. And these are all wonderfully committed and dedicated to their communities, the folks who are at these jurisdictions. So make sure that you know them by name. Make sure they know the name of your project. Make sure that you have an open communication with them. And you will often see doing favors for each other, being able to have somebody reach out because they say, hey, our community director was talking about this, and we thought it might have something to do with your project as well. Those things can really help you get from the start to the end of these, and it just makes it lifts everybody's sails a little bit as well to be excited for the things they're working on.
And finally, the mantra for the three things that we're talking about: infrastructure, start early, identify your partners early, get the right consultants. Departmental complexity, again, identifying, starting early. And for code misalignment, we really need more advocacy in this work, right? And when we were working on policy on Housing Production Advisory Council, a lot of the developers really wanted predictability. How can I have predictability? And do we get that through pre-application conference? But what we're finding more and more is that even when we're doing very small project like, 40-unit project where we would want to have that, turn around very quickly, we're still running through a lot of these issues. And primarily because the site we have available for affordable housing sites are not necessarily the most, site that is serviced with infrastructure. Given that reality, we do have to look at, okay, how can we find partnership all throughout to really make sure that these kinds of housings are being built fast and quick. So with that, that is our final piece, and wanted to see if you have any other thoughts or questions for us that you would want to add to the recommendation that we would proceed, move forward to the
Question about Colonia.
council.
I noticed that they, somewhat ironically, that arterial street is called Goldfish Farm Road. Kind of a hint, right? There might be a pond here someplace. But nonetheless,
There was, actually, yeah.
I always like go upstream. Politics is a contact sport, right? Sometimes the public works director controls the power. Sometimes the planning director actually controls the power. Hardly ever. Rarely does the city manager actually control the power because the turnover is so rapid, right? They never accumulate that much power. But whose good idea was it to put an arterial street through a residential neighborhood? Because your neighbor to the north is homes, it's built, near as I can tell.
Correct, but it's tying into the 20 directly to the north.
So there's no way they could have gone to the east.
There is, actually. There's another developer who is working on putting in another arterial to open up the industrial area to the south, but they're still requiring our arterial.
So to me, I always try to go back to that decision that was made.
I have,
It's
yes.
been a defective decision in the first place.
Yes, and with the new developer coming into the west of us, our thought was maybe we can get away with not having to finish the arterial if they're putting in one for heavy industrial traffic, but we haven't had a decision made there yet.
And I think that decision as well was probably years and years in the making about how they imagined the development of 20 reaching the county road to the south. And so could it have been accomplished earlier on as a standalone project? Certainly. But I think that in this case here, knowing that was like the biggest goal for them to make that connection for, say, fire access or connecting communities together, those kind of decisions are things that if you know early on that is going to be, this department, like they have an ultimate goal for this, and knowing what those goals are for those sites can really inform how you take on development for them.
And there's currently there's a current sewer easement that runs along that line, which is why the road follows that line,
So yeah, wondering whether the decision was purely based on, hey, there's already an existing public easement here.
Yeah.
Who knows? But knowing that was there, it can really set up what that, phase development looks like.
Are there any other questions?
Well, if not, thank you so much for your attention for this presentation. And I know these issues and these kinds of issues will continue, and we just have to collaborate and figure out how can we make these things a little bit more efficient. Thank you so much.
My superintendent called. Yeah. Yeah.
So we're with Echo Northwest, and we are about to embark on a study with PCDS and HAPO about the business, the residential. I believe you guys
Hey, thank you so much.
The person I was trying to remember,
Oh.
your mic is on.
Oh. Thank you.